Pokemon's most evil strategies. This deck was stumbled into purely by accident at a pre-release back in 2011, where a bulk uncommon destroyed the metagame, striking fear into the hearts of every Pokemon player around the globe. Durant was an innocent looking uncommon with the Devour attack that would discard the top card of your opponent's deck for each Durant you had in play. This would add up fast, and even if you would KO your opponent's Durant, all they would have to do is play a revive to get it straight back again, meaning they would use Devour and Devour and Devour turn after turn after turn. And it wasn't even a problem getting all these Durant out and into play, because Pichu would immediately grab them all on your first turn. Combine this with a ton of disruption with cards like Crushing Hammer to remove energy, Catcher to bring up and strand awkward Pokemon into the active spot, and Eviolite plus special metal energy to make Durant extra tanky. This deck was fast, devastating and soul destroying, and there was often nothing you could do apart from watch your deck get discarded very quickly. Results from this era are quite limited, but we do know that Durant definitely got a 5th place at Singapore States and 10th place at a European Regional as well, but it would terrorize locals evilly. Now imagine this, you're at the biggest event in Europe, travelling all the way to London from Australia, currently one game away from winning the whole event and taking home $25,000 US. You're excited, but also a bit nervous about how the game will pan out. And before you had a chance to even play a single card, you have lost the game. Yep, that dream has been snatched away from you. That's exactly what Ryuki's Poison Donk deck did. This deck aims to win games as brutally fast as possible by going first and using Brute Bonnet to poison both active Pokemon, then using Petulant's top 6 subjugation ability to boost poison damage all the way up to 60. And you can even use Perilous Jungle to boost it up even further, meaning that if you opened a low hit point Pokemon in the active and nothing else, you would instantly lose the game. And it was that mean and cruel that it didn't even stop there, because if you were going second, you could use Clorf's Unhinged Scissors attack to quickly KO any low hit point Pokemon or even high hit point fighting weak Pokemon like Fezandipity, which you know is only a format staple and every deck plays it. Meaning if you're playing against a Poison Donk deck, you have a very high chance that you will lose the game before you had a chance to do anything. And it wasn't just Terrapagos that this could work with, since Petulant also won the special event in Pagoda paired with Roaring Moon, and that also got second in Malaysia as well as getting 2 top 16s at Atlanta and 3rd in Portland Juniors when paired with Archaludon. Stealing games away instantly is, well, just downright evil. And we might not even need to rely on Petulant anymore, since now we have Meloetta EX in format, who can attack on your first turn going first, making this problem potentially even worse. Somehow, this isn't even the first time instant win decks have been in Pokemon, since Shiftry had about a 2 or 3 week reign of terror, but it was enough to leave a scar in the expanded format and in the collective player base minds. Its giant fan ability triggered every time you evolved into it. Flip a coin, and if it was heads, you could shuffle away one of your opponent's Pokemon back into their deck. Now normally that's balanced by the fact that Shiftry is a stage 2, meaning it's hard, slow and clunky to get into play, so your opponent would have time to fill up their bench. But then Forest of Giant Plants got released, and suddenly grass types could evolve the same turn that they were played down. So you could go Seedot, Nuzleaf, Shiftry in the same turn instantly. And if you went first and your opponent only opened 1 Pokemon, which is incredibly common by the way, you could turbo through your deck to drop as many Shiftry down as possible and keep flipping coins until you hit heads. And as soon as you did, you would win the game before your opponent did anything. And it expanded with its massive card pool. It wasn't just one Shiftry, you could recycle loads of them with AZ, Super Scoop Up and Scoop Up Cyclone, and to be honest even more. Games were ended before they even began, and the format delved into coin flip nightmares. It was such a miserable experience to play against that Shiftry who was quickly hit with a ban before the chaos could spread further. However, in Phantom Forces, a supporter card did something that completely broke the game. Forced both players to shuffle their entire discard pile back into their decks. On paper, that would just kill out the deck win condition, right? Well, in reality, it unleashed one of the dirtiest control decks we have ever seen. Enter Trump card Seismitoad. This strategy was simple and disgusting. You would turbo through your entire deck using Shaymin EX, Acrobite and Trainer's Mail, pulling out a whole suite of disruption to get your crushing hammers, enhanced hammers and headringers. Basically every card in format designed to stop your opponent from attacking. Super Scoop Up would recycle your Shaymin for even more draws. And then when you were out of resources, you would play Lissandre's trump card to shuffle them all back in, and then use Quaking Punch from Seismitoad EX to lock your opponent from playing any item cards. So with there being no real drawback to, drawing your entire deck, the metagame quickly developed into Toad Shaymin mirrors or anti-Toad Shaymin counter decks. And this was so oppressive and obvious that on June the 15th, Lissandre's trump card got banned, becoming one of the only few supporter cards to get banned from both standard and the expanded formats. And somehow, this wasn't even the only time Seismitoad had been that evil, since later on we had one of the most disgusting decks I've ever seen and played against, Seismitoad Garbodor. See, Quake and Punch will stop your opponent from playing item cards, which is mean because, as we already know, the entire format ran on them at the time, but then Garbodor would step in to be extra rude. Garbodor's ability Garbotoxin would turn off all other abilities while it was in play. This meant playing against Seismitoad Garbodor was a snore fest because you couldn't play Ultra Ball, you couldn't set up, quite honestly it was just no fun. And what made this deck even deadlier is that it had one of the most effective and devastating combat plays of all time, N to 1. N was a supporter card that would shuffle both players' hands into their deck, and then they would draw one card for each prize card they had remaining. So if you managed to claw your way towards a victory and you were 1k away from winning the game, your opponent would just fire off an N, reducing your hand size down to 1, use Garbotoxin to make sure that you couldn't use any abilities, and then use Quaking Punch to march their way to victory, with you not being able to do anything about it. No abilities, no items, no nothing. And if you think this strategy was unique to slow lumbering decks like Seismitoad, then think again, because Hex March took this ability lock strategy and turned the dial up to 11. This Night March deck would often deal out 150 to 200 damage turn after turn after turn, all with rinky dink one prize Pokemon, because Night March would do more damage for each Night March Pokemon you had in your discard pile. But here's the rub, you would aim to use Hex Maniac supporter as often as possible, since Hex Maniac would turn off all Pokemon abilities on your opponent's turn, and with VS Seeker this was very easy to do, making getting one shot by these little one prize Pokemon even worse, since now you had no abilities to try and reload. Evil. This next deck was so evil that it actually won the World Championships out of nowhere. You would use Archie's Ace in the Hole supporter to get a Blastoise into play turn 1. And now you had access to that amazing ability Deluge, a turn earlier than you realistically should have it, since it was a stage 2 and you've got it on turn 1. And with that, you can pile on a ton of energy onto your attackers, and boy did you have some good ones. Keldeo EX was the main one, who would deal more damage for each water energy attached, this is very good, and its ability would let you get it into the active spot fast. Articuno would take extra prize cards when it KO'd something, which is nice, and if everything goes wrong, you have Mewtwo EX's X-Ball, which is a safe fallback option. This deck was so consistent, so fast and aggressive, thanks to cards like Battle Compressor, VS Seeker and Computer Search, that it took over the 2015 World Championships in one of the most lopsided finals we had ever seen. But now we are turning back the clock all the way to 2010, where we have one of the most grindiest decks we had ever seen, and it was so successful, getting a top 4 and a top 8 at US Nationals and 3 top 16s at 2010 Worlds. It was built around Dialga G, who had the Deafen attack, which will stop your opponent from playing any items or stages. This on its own should be bad enough. This on its own is as bad as Seismitoad, right? But somehow it gets worse, because if you leveled up into Dialga G level X, you now had access to its Pokebody Time Crystal, which turns off all other Pokebodies. Rude, meaning Dialga G level X is essentially Seismitoad and Garbodor slammed together. And somehow it gets worse, because you could buff it with cards like Expert Belt to deal extra damage, Special Metal Energy to reduce damage, and Crobat G to chip in extra damage as well. But the extra mean part is still yet to come, since when you were getting close to KOing the Dialga, they would slam down Garchomp C level X, which would completely heal it, meaning you were right back to square one, still getting hit by Deafen. And to make it even worse, they played Power Spray, which you could play on your opponent's turn whenever they tried to activate a power, and then you could negate it, meaning you really had no hope, meaning a single Dialga could easily solo you the whole game. But in my opinion, this next combination of cards created the worst Pokemon TCG format of all time. Games could be decided before you even drew your first card, and I'm not being hyperbolic. At the heart of this chaos was Rocket's Trap. Flip a coin, and if it was heads, you would choose 3 random cards from your opponent's hand and shuffle them back into their deck. Now imagine going first and flipping heads on 2 of these. You instantly stripped your opponent's entire hand before they had a chance to do anything. That was the reality of this format. And Rocket's Trap arguably wasn't even the worst offender, because you had Rocket's Sneak Attack as well. That would let you look at your opponent's hand, choose any trainer card you'd find there and shuffle that back, meaning you could surgically remove any hope they had of recovering, and then use Rocket's Trap to rip the rest away. And if that wasn't enough, you also had Imposter Oak's Revenge, which reset your opponent's hand down to 4. So your ideal opening turn was just pure villainy. Play an Oak's Revenge and then chain together Sneak Attacks and Rocket's Traps until your opponent had nothing left in their hand. And the cherry on top was Erica's Jigglypuff. Its Pull Punch attack would hit for 40 for just a double colorless energy, meaning if you threw a couple plus powers in, you was one-shotting almost every basic Pokemon in the game, and you leave your opponent's hand at 0. So if you was on the receiving end of this, you should basically concede. There was no sugarcoating this, downright disgusting. Complete hand wipe before turn 1 was even over, backed up with immediate knockouts. For me, it's the most toxic format the TCG has ever seen. But luckily the savior of the format, Cleffa, was released very soon, and it instantly wiped away with all the Rocket cards, making them useless, since it would instantly refill your hand with the Eek attack. So now people could draw cards and actually keep them, so our hand should be safe, right? Well, in a cruel twist of fate, Cleffa became the thing it was built to destroy, since now you had an even easier hand wipe by using Lass to shuffle in all trainers from both players' hands, and then you would use Eek afterwards to instantly fill your hand back up. Meaning if your opponent didn't have an Eek to fall back on, then they were out of luck. And this was rampant everywhere. How evil. But lastly, we have 2 creations from the mad scientist of Pokemon, Sander Wojcik. Now he is known for taking the most bonkers and bulk cards all the way to the tippy top tables at the world's biggest stages. And there are 2 decks I want to look at here today. At EUIC, he stunned the world with Umbreon VMAX, but it wasn't even an attacking deck per se. See, he worked out that the whole format would really struggle to KO 2 Umbreon VMAX if you could heal them every turn. Arceus V-Star was capped at 230 damage max, Rapid Strike Urshifu wasn't coming close, and Single Strike really wasn't a thing yet. Now, Mew VMAX could KO 1 Umbreon VMAX with Power Tablet spam for sure, but that would mean the second one was always safe. So he cooked up Umbreon Sun and Moon Badge Loop, where you would tank a hit with Umbreon, then use Bird Keeper to maneuver it to the bench, attach your Sun and Moon Badge to it so it couldn't get bosses ordered, and then you would promote a new Umbreon to tank a hit. And then when it did, you would bench Eldegoss to bring back a Bird Keeper, play a Cheryl to completely heal both your Umbreon VMAX, retreat for free thanks to an air balloon, and then attack with your Eldegoss to remove it from play, and then promote Umbreon again. With this loop, you could cycle endlessly until your opponent was forced to deck out, since if they couldn't one-shot an Umbreon at this moment of the game, they were out of luck, since Sun and Moon Badge would stop you from ever using boss's orders to break the lock. Truly ingenious levels of deck building. And these were on full display again if we was to fast forward a few months later to NAIC, where Sander took a very literal bulk card and joke mechanic all the way to top 4 at the biggest event of the year, and quite honestly he could have easily won the whole thing. V-Unions were a joke mechanic, forcing you to get 4 different cards into your discard pile before you could play all 4 of them from the discard pile at once to create a boss monster of sorts. These had high powered attacks, abilities and hit points, but they were offset by giving up 3 prize cards when they got KO'd, and they were really hard to get into play. So Sander, the mad lad, looked at the format again and said, if you guys can't KO an Umbreon VMAX, there's no way you can KO this Mewtwo, since it had the super regeneration attack that would let you heal 200 damage from the Mewtwo for free, no drawback. And since your support for the turn was freed up now, you could play all the disruption you wanted, and the second your opponent couldn't attack, you could fire off high powered Explosions to spread 16 damage counters, or final burns for 300 damage. Attacks you really couldn't eat a lot of, meaning the second Mewtwo came out to play, you were often set to lose already. but you had a good few turns left before the door was slammed shut on you. If you really like this video, please subscribe. I'm so close to 20,000 subscribers and your support would be greatly appreciated. And why don't you watch this video here, where we look at every mechanic to ever come out in a Pokemon TCG and then we rank them as well.